as we read about communion and we see it the way it's talked about in the Bible, it's always together. And if it's a sign of togetherness and it's a sign of unity, and we call it communion, which in English has a lot of similarities to the words community and in common, and it means togetherness, is there almost, I'd say, a legitimacy to taking it alone. Welcome to the second episode of the Western Heights Community Podcast, the winter episode, the winter apocalypse episode.
That's right.
I am Terrance Cottle, and I'm the youth and family minister here.
So I'm Mitch Wiggins. I'm the preaching minister. And last but not least,
I'm Rusty Sherry, and I'm the associate minister, and I just try to help the other guys with stuff they're doing.
What did you call him one time? The life support minister?
Yeah, I used to refer to Rusty as the minister, the life support minister, because for a time, the term associate can mean so many things. I think we chatted a little bit about that last week, about all the titles or all the responsibilities that Rusty's had over the years. But for a while, it was, hey, we like this ministry. We think that no one's in charge of it right now. Let's give it to Rusty so it doesn't die. And he had several ministries for a while. So
Some thought that I was the assistant minister, so I was assisting Mitch.
I also call him that when I came.
Yeah, the assistant coach minister.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here's my assistant. It's really fun.
So we're here. We're back, and people might be watching us even with video this time. Technology improving, evolving as we go along, despite the weather. Boy, I think this is also the first official church activity since Sunday morning, probably, right? Of any kind.
I guess
I
so.
wouldn't call this official.
No. Yeah, never mind.
That's probably true.
That's the point. I take it back. Somebody cut that part. Boy.
So, Terrance, one thing that you were going to mention before that you didn't get into in the last one was Winterfest. Tell us some Winterfest stories.
Yeah, now that we have a winter, I'm very glad that we did not have this winter for Winterfest.
Yeah.
That would have complicated the bus drive from Sherman to Fort Worth a little bit more than the stock show and rodeo already did. Loved that was going on at the same time a couple weeks ago. So yeah, man. So we took the kids. It's been 2 weeks ago now for the weekend long youth conference at Winterfest. And I think I mentioned this last week that all the speakers were great. We had a really good time, but there was a couple things in particular that I thought were hilarious. And one was that the second night, Michaela comes in and she goes, guys, we have to get there earlier because whatever they do, I want to get on stage. And she is determined. And we're like, okay, well, we'll get dinner here and we'll come back here and we'll be there plenty of time. And the timing kind of worked out, but we still got there like 5 minutes late. But as soon as she walks in, I guess people had just flooded the front section. So they were not really down front. They were kind of in the middle back, really, in the first floor, middle section of the auditorium. And so I thought, well, okay, that didn't really work, but we'll see. In the first act, the entertainer guy is like a juggler. He comes out and he picks people who are like, of course, right in the front on the left side. And I was like, not even close. But later in the act, his sons were also part of the juggling and they come down. They're picking somebody out and they come right down our aisle and they're coming by us and we are screaming our heads off and we're trying to get her to stand up and jump up and down. But Michaela doesn't want to do that, but she is waving her hand, but she's trying to kind of sit in her seat and we're all screaming and yelling. But he walks right by us and he gets to the back of the section and he turns around. And he comes back and he calls her out and he calls Michaela up on stage. So that was actually really fun. Michaela got to go up and be part of the juggling. But I was more impressed
so
with the fact that she called her
stoked.
shot.
Yeah.
Oh, she was, and her part was actually kind of fascinating because they did the thing where they were juggling like around her and had her walk back and forth through it. They hit something out of her mouth, which was crazy. But I was more impressed that she was like, this is going to happen. And it actually did. It actually did. We didn't really get the seats we wanted, but it still went the way she wanted it to.
So she will start taking money for predictions or bribes or for her to manifest Super Bowl winner. I don't know what. No, I'm kidding.
Yes, no. Manifest was the word of the day after that.
Yeah, it was pretty
Manifest was
funny.
the word of the day. Another just kind of piece of it that y'all two might especially enjoy as girl dads was there was a time at one point where I had to leave Priscilla with the girls at the mall, and I had to leave and come back. And I don't think anybody can hear that. And if they do, we'll cut this part out, but that's okay.
It's a phone, by the way, in the background.
Yeah,
Something's on fire outside.
it's,
Um,
it's alarm system going. No worry.
yeah, just sirens. Don't worry about it. So I had to leave Priscilla with the girls at the mall. I had to leave and come back. And when I came back, I was looking for them in the mall, and I found her and the gaggle of all the high school girls. And I had what has to have been one of the first like girl dad moments for me. Preview both of our sons are boys, or both, of course, both of our children. Um,
I'm really glad about this.
no further comments on
Oh,
that, other than both of our children are boys, is what I meant to
oh
say.
my word.
But I come back to the mall, and one by one they start coming up to me and like, "Look what I got, and I got this thing, and it was this. She got this dress, and it was 70% off, and they got this thing, and it was only this, and I went to this place, and they got it." And one by one, they're just telling me like what they purchased and how little they paid for it, or how good it was that they paid for it. And I had this strange thing happening in my head where I'm like, I don't know what you're saying, but I can tell it's really important to you. And so this feels impactful to the relationship. And it reminded me of if y'all have ever had a dog that is a hunting type dog. It reminds me of one time when my dog brought me like the dead rabbit. And I was like, I don't know what you want me to do with this, but I can tell you're really proud. So I'm really happy for you. And that's how I felt with the 4 or 5 different high school girls came up with their bags of stuff that were showing me what they got. Is I don't really know what this means, but I can tell you're very proud. So I'm very proud of you.
So,
Let
Rusty,
me-
do we lean into this?
Yeah, so let me make
Okay.
a suggestion to you. If you ever have a daughter, or even if your son ever does anything and brings it something, whatever it is to you, don't use the dog comparison.
Yeah, don't call him a
Don't tell
dog.
That's not going to work
Don't-
out very well for you. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, there
Don't
you
tell
go.
them they remind me of a dog holding a dead animal.
No,
Yeah,
do not do that.
don't.
Unless it's the son bringing me an actual dead animal, in which case
That would be different, of course.
That would be
yes.
different. Yes. Or
Yeah,
a
Jake
daughter
really
that
saw.
brings you a dead animal that,
You never
it's
know.
not-
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah.
So,
That was our weekend story. What about you guys?
so
Anything
so
exciting?
talking about that, we had FaceTime with some of our grandkids this weekend, and 2 of the boys up in Tulsa. I made some kind of comment to them. They had already been out in the snow and stuff. And I said, well, don't go out there barefoot. And that's exactly what they did. They get that. You could see in their head, it was like, we should do it. So they ran outside right then, no shoes on, no socks on, and ran around the snow and started screaming. And so I just thought that was hilarious. Their dad cleared off the driveway so they could play basketball out there in their shorts. They put shoes on for that, but yeah, just kind of crazy
What
stuff.
possessed you to unpromptly tell them, "Hey, whatever you do, don't go out there barefoot"?
I don't remember what brought that up, but they had already been out there and they just like to try different new things. So yeah.
There you go.
My insight, I don't have any teenage boys, but my insight from being one is that's about the quickest way to get them to do anything.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and these aren't teens; they're little, but that was
Yeah, it might be an age universal experience for some boys, unfortunately.
Yeah. I feel like a little kid whenever this kind of weather comes. I'm out, whether I should be or not. I'm checking on the roads, driving on it, finding any excuse to do some donuts in the church parking lot. As a friend
Yeah,
of mine
somebody-
said, you
yeah.
have to have donuts on Sunday morning. And so if the
Yes.
church building isn't open, someone had to provide some donuts.
Someone has to bring the donuts.
Yeah, I thought that was good wisdom.
Yeah, Mitch put this out Sunday if anyone needs help. But what he didn't tell you is that he is dying to take the truck out four-wheeling as an excuse to go run errands for anybody if anyone still needs anything.
That's true. That is true.
I can sense the glee
Yeah.
bubbling and the restraint in your voice. So I guess speaking of Sunday, we'll go ahead and use this as an excuse to switch into what would normally be the sermon recap part of our podcast, but there was no sermon. There was no sermon, so there's no sermon to recap. But as I was, I don't know, giving, whether we're going to call it a short worship or a long communion thought, it occurred to me something I guess I just hadn't really thought about in a long time, probably 5 or 6 years. And Mitch, you probably had a similar experience, but the family was in the other room, so I'm in this room by myself because I don't really need the two toddlers' voices on the nice little intimate, quiet, reverent communion thought we're trying to have, and it just kind of got me wondering. Well, what what really? I don't want to say what is the point, but why do some people take it alone? And I know you guys know what I'm talking about, but just for example, my grandmother, who doesn't drive as far, doesn't like driving at night, doesn't get out much, still very much wants to be part of her church. But for the last, man, maybe even, I mean, it's definitely since COVID, maybe last 10, 15 years, has probably taken it more at home watching church than she really has been able to with the fellowship. And it just had me thinking as we read about communion and we see it the way it's talked about in the Bible, it's always together. And if it's a sign of togetherness and it's a sign of unity, and we call it communion, which in English has a lot of similarities to the words community and in common, and it means togetherness. What is really, is there a significance? Is there almost, I'd say, a legitimacy to taking it alone?
Honestly, I think that's a really good question and something that we ought to wrestle with. But before we dive in, let me just say, Terrence, I thought you did an awesome job in
Mm,
the Communion Thought Sunday, bringing a lot of
appreciate.
wonderful things together. And in a moment like that, where we are isolated because of weather, um, that we kind of get a sense for those of us who are in the middle of child rearing or just kind of normal life, you almost get a sense of what our homebound, stay at home people who are restricted for whatever reasons, not being able to come out, what they feel every week. And so it's not just a question of
Yeah, true.
once, it's a question of what do we do with this all the time? Um, what does communion mean? What does that look like? What does that, how does that work? And I think it's a very valid question. Rusty, you got anything to add? And then we can dive in further.
Well, yeah, there are a lot of people that's just where they're at. They don't have a choice, really. If they're gonna take it, they have to have somebody bring it to them, and they can either take it with whoever brings it to them, or they will have to take it by themselves. And we have people who will come up here to the office who may not be homebound themselves, but their, husband or wife is. And so they get communion, they take it together and watch the live stream. But that's the only option available to them if they're gonna take it at all. And so, that gets us to the question that you were just asking, well, why do we do this? If it's communion, then how does that need to work? And can you commune with a couple of people? Well, I would think so. Can you commune with others if you're by yourself? Well, that seems to be harder. Um, but but then why do we do that? Why do we feel like we need to take it? And should we feel like we need to take it? I mean, I think those are fair questions to ask and answers that it would be good for us to kind of check on.
So I do think part of it is, this is a question that fits within the niche of our corner of Christianity. A
Yeah,
lot. What I mean
yeah,
by that is there's a lot of denominations that don't take communion regularly, and so it's not even a question that they ask. But it was not even a second thought for us that when we had to cancel services at the building due to weather, like, it was natural for us to say, "Well, we're gonna have a communion service." And we were before that with the possibility of it coming up, one of our elders, like, grabbed some of the communion supplies on Wednesday night and said, "Hey, I don't know where we'll be Sunday. If you wanna take some just in case." And it was just that
yeah,
forethought that this is a very natural conversation for those of us in the churches of Christ because we view, communion with a lot of hallowed ground. When someone gets up to do the communion thought, it is not unheard of for them to talk about it being the most important or the reason that we gather,
yeah.
which I think feeds into this conversation. If it's the reason we gather, then how does it work whenever we can't gather? What does that mean? What does that look like? And is a digital gathering good enough? I don't know
Yeah.
how to, for lack of better words there.
You and I have talked about this before, but to build off Rusty's or your comment about it puts us in a weird place theologically compared to other Christians. For those who are familiar with historical theology, broader Christianity, the denomination, whatever we want to kind of call it, um, we are in a weird place where we are both like the high church, as they sometimes call it, which is Catholicism, Lutheranism, Anglicans. I think Episcopal probably falls into that. Presbyterian falls in that in a sense. But we're also like what some theologians call low church, which is the evangelicals, the Baptists, in the sense that we don't have a official clergy laity divide. Now, we could talk about how our church has historically viewed its ministers, but theologically, technically, we do not have a thing where we say, no, our clergy are set apart and they're sacred in some way, but we still have a very high sacramental view of things like baptism, high sacramental view of things like the Lord's Supper. So we're in this weird place
Even if we
where,
don't call it sacraments. Like,
right. Oh,
I didn't
yeah.
grow up
Yeah.
with that
Boy.
language. I've used it more recently. But yeah, even
Mhm.
if we don't call it sacraments, we are have a pretty high view of certain sacraments.
No, yeah, that's a great point because yeah, I never heard that term until I went to Bible college.
Yeah.
Was not familiar with sacraments at all, but as soon as they were described, I was like, "Oh, yeah, we have to." Right away, without him telling me, I was like, "Yeah, we have to. Baptism, Lord's Supper, 100%." So what so yeah, I guess what are some so we used to have Sunday nights here, but that was pre my time. How did we do it on Sunday nights? Because everybody does it differently. How did we do it Sunday nights here when we had Sunday nights? A
Rusty, you
traditional
wanna take
quote
Yeah,
this?
unquote
I'll go.
Sunday night
Yeah.
service.
So basically what we would do is at the end of the service on Sunday night, if there was anyone who um, was not there that morning, had not had an opportunity to take the Lord's Supper um, during the last song, they would be dismissed and they would go back to another room and then take it. Generally, there were at least a handful, if not more, at least early on when we were here, that who would take it together. So somebody would go back there to lead the prayers, pass out the bread and the fruit of the vine to them, and and then they would take it together. So, but if there was just one person, they would still do that, and then they would take it. And I believe, and I may be wrong about this, we do have a group that meets up here on Sunday night. I think that they still ask that same question. I could be wrong.
I think they
Uh,
do.
they still ask that question. I don't know whether they'll take it there together with them with everyone, or if they'll go someplace else. I'm not sure how they handle that right now.
Yeah,
So
so this is
I
one
wanna
of those
come back to the small group things,
oh,
but I'll
okay,
go
okay.
ahead, Mitch.
Well,
I
this
wanna
is one
put
of the
a footnote in
fascinating
that
things for
quick.
me is because how we do, especially like Sunday night communion, says a lot about how we view communion. And so I've been in churches where they'll do the same thing. They'll ask if anyone hasn't taken it. You know, there's a room prepared. Someone will say, "Raise your hand," and they
Yeah, I've
serve
seen
them in
that.
that moment.
Mhm.
Um, I've only been I've only been to one place that you know they asked, "Hey, is anyone need to take communion or wasn't able to today?" And if so, if someone was in that state, they actually everyone there took it together, and
Hmm.
that was just fascinating to me because it was so different.
So some
Because
people took it twice.
yes, so some
Mhm.
people ended up taking it twice.
Hmm.
Now, I'd heard of that at other churches as well, but I hadn't participated in a church that had done that. So,
I do know one of the places I went, they did it similar to what they did the backroom thing. They said years ago, but if there was only one person, the guy administering it, he would always take it with them because he knew
mhm.
deep down. He's like, there's something weird. I'm not going to sit here and watch you take it alone. You
Mhm.
should take it as a sign of us doing this together. I wanted to just read, I guess, to kind of loosely center this conversation in some sort of scripture. I wanted to reread the passage that I read Sunday because this is kind of where this comes from. And it's New King James, 1 Corinthians 10:16. The cup of blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Christ? The bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Christ? For we, though many, are one bread and one body, for we all partake of that one bread. and I usually lean into more ESV, NIV, but they talk about the participation, they talk about the shared blood, the shared body of Christ. So even in those other translations, it's clear that that act is a participation in the church thing together.
Mhm.
So were we together Sunday morning?
So that's a great question of is together limited to physicalness, or can together be mind, spirit, spiritual
Yeah.
sense? Um, I know that whenever I was in Greece for my semester abroad, whenever I was in college, these the service that I went to that had English as one of the languages that it spoke was at 6 p.m. I think, but I did the math at one point, and with the time difference and all of that, I was worshiping the same time that my church back home was. And so I was taking communion at the same time as them,
Yeah.
and it really helped me connect overseas before we had things like FaceTime and cell phones really. I mean, for some of this, it helped me connect back with that church because I knew that they were doing this with me, even though the me wasn't with them.
Yeah.
We were there together. And so I think there's something to be said about that, some kind of merit that we have to understand that togetherness isn't limited to a physical sense, but at the same time, we shouldn't discount the physical gathering.
Yeah, I'd agree with what Mitch is saying. Obviously, if we are together where we can see each other and talk to each other, um, that feeling is very different. If we're in a separate room, even though we know everybody's taking it at the same time, that feels a little bit different. But we're still together, and there is an encouragement. I would say, and we had mentioned this before uh, the podcast, but you guys were by yourselves in a room.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
two separate
Yeah.
rooms, right? So the rest of us, many of us were with someone else wherever we were watching from. And so it didn't feel like we were at least not with someone else.
Right.
But your families were actually in another part of the house simply because you didn't want the distractions or the interruptions while you're taking it.
Well, let me clarify.
Right?
It's not because we
Or-
didn't want the
Okay.
interruptions. It's that recording wise, we
Recording
wanted to
wise,
make sure
yes.
that the rest of the congregation, was able to focus, was able, and
Right.
that helps us if you're not hearing background noises or having to all of a sudden say,
Sure.
you know, Zoe, take that somewhere else. Kind of
Yeah,
interrupts the
they're the same
communion
interruptions
service.
we
Right.
get on Sunday morning when we're by ourselves in the pew. They're the
That's
same
true.
interruptions.
That's
Right.
We
true.
didn't wanna transmit those interruptions to everybody's communion
You
time.
don't give those interruptions a mic. So
Okay.
That's
So this
exactly,
wasn't something we were going to
exactly.
talk about, but I just thought of it. So I'm
go
sorry. I
for it.
throw stuff out
I'm
there every once in a
excited.
while. So is it possible that even with the possible distractions and the complications with regard to a recording,
This
even with those,
is
would that have been a blessing for the
Yeah,
rest of us?
yeah.
Does it make sense?
I
That's
think that's a
interesting.
fair.
So
And even with that, would it have been a blessing for
for
me
you,
or Terrance
yes,
Yeah, yeah,
personally
right,
with our families there? Yes, it would not have felt as distant or
unnatural.
estranged.
Yeah,
I
Um,
would really be curious, whoever ends up listening to this, what they think about that.
agreed. Agreed.
Yeah. So,
Give
okay.
us some feedback.
yeah, I'm curious, but I will say, everybody wants children around in theory.
No, I get that.
Until the children are at your table or in your pew or the pew behind you or next to you and they're hitting you in the back of the head. But so
Yes.
far we're still new. Everyone's been very gracious to us. In fact, we try to like hop around. We usually gravitate to being up front by the youth kids, but we kind of
Mhm.
hop around and inevitably if there's always a sweet couple behind us, it's like y'all should sit in front of us every week. You
Yeah.
know. They said,
Well,
yeah,
Yeah,
your
I
kids are adorable.
I would say that Jesus was pretty clear that he wanted the children around.
I'd
That's
agree.
true. That's
So,
true.
And the moment that this is the uncomfortable part, that the moment we start talking about kids as a distraction is the
Yeah.
moment that we have started losing something.
mhm.
That they're really not a distraction. They may be, we may get distracted, but the kid's not a distraction. The kid is a
What's where we're
kid,
confused the
and it
disciples.
teaches and shows us
Like, "Get
something
out of
here.
here."
Right.
Yeah. So, w back with the communion thought and all of that, yeah,
Yeah.
Rusty, I think you're onto something that it would have changed how I felt in that moment. Now,
Uh-huh.
granted, I've been here long enough, during communion, I'm able to picture all of or a good chunk of the church. Like, I would
Yeah.
physically, like, where they sit and just kinda think about communing with them. And I'll be honest, whenever I'm not around people, we may have a lot of different ideas about what we should think about during the communion time, during that silent
Hmm.
time. My one of my favorites really is to really think of the congregation, to think of the community of Christ, the body of Christ, as the way Scripture would talk about it,
Yeah.
but the body in the faces. And so this past Sunday, I leaned heavily upon that because they weren't there physically.
Uh-huh.
And it's amazing to me that that practice actually is what helps me whenever I recognize, hey, so and so hasn't been here in a while. And it's communion that gets
Mm.
me thinking about them because I miss being in fellowship with them.
Communing.
Yeah, I miss communing.
Yes, it's funny, Rusty, 'cause it would not have occurred to me at all what you suggested, but now that I'm sitting here thinking about it on this kind of tension between, our professionalism and need for reverence versus maybe our more natural,
Uh-huh.
uh, family-centered way we ought to be in the church. There is a tension there. But it did give me the opportunity, and Mitch, you mentioned this earlier, but to see it through the lens of the way that I know. So regardless of whether we're talking about ourselves, I know there are people out there who their regular practice is they take it at home. They take it at home by themselves and they're watching or they're participating online or maybe there's someone who can't get in the morning, so they go at Sunday night. And so their communion experience is often alone. And it kinda took me back to COVID a little bit, and not to dive too much into that, but I know everybody kinda handled that differently during that time on how they did it. But, again, something you mentioned, Mitch, is it's very important to us. In fact, it was kinda funny during that time to see when churches distilled worship down, like, what are the things we absolutely have to do? And everyone handled the sermon a little bit differently. Everyone handled the songs a little bit differently, the worship part of it, whether they had someone leading, a few people singing, did they just play music? But as far as I know in the Church of Christ, almost everyone included some way of honoring communion, even though they couldn't take it all. Still go back to that question. If the point of this breaking bread is to break bread together, if the sign of it is not just remembering Jesus till he comes, but sort of agreeing with one another and showing our fellowship with one another, what is the significance of someone taking it at home? And is it more than just checking the box that week? And I'm not suggesting that's the only reason. I think you guys know what I mean.
Well, and I hope for anyone taking communion, it's more than just checking a box. Because let's be honest, you could
Yeah,
check the box sitting in the pew next to 200, 300 other people. It should be much more
true,
than that.
true.
But I think you're right that our motivation and our reason and rationale behind it, is really important. Whenever I was a kid and we'd have the very rare, trip that would leave Sunday morning, my
Yeah,
dad, who was one of those who helped prepare communion, like, all of us that were going on this trip, we would go early, help prepare communion for the rest of the congregation, and then we would take communion there together in a small little service, and I loved those because it was a different way of looking at a different idea, and I never felt like it was checking a box. "Well, we gotta do this before we go, otherwise
right,
our worship doesn't count."
right.
Uh, it to me was a way of saying, "Why would I miss this? Why would I
Hmm.
miss an opportunity to share the body and the blood of Jesus, with whoever else in the world is gonna take it? This is the thing that binds us together."
So if
I could tell Rusty was
it
cooking something up over there.
okay, well, I'm just thinking. I'm sorry. I had it in my head and then it kind of ran away from me. But so this idea of coming together, obviously that's a huge part of this, right? It is a supper that you eat together.
Mhm.
I mean, it came out of the Passover meal, correct? I mean,
Yes.
they
Mm.
gathered
Yes.
together. Okay, they were eating, and when you look at, 1 Corinthians 11, they were coming together for a meal, and within that meal, they were also taking the Lord's Supper. And they had, some issues with that because they weren't really taking care of each other. So, it's about coming together, and yet, in addition to that, I think in chapter 11, it says we are proclaiming the Lord's death until he comes.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Is that where that
Mhm.
is? Okay, so it's a statement of faith in a sense as well. So if you can't meet, okay, just I'm just making this up. You're in a situation where you cannot meet with others. It's a remembering of what Jesus has done, which we want to remember, and proclaiming what Jesus has done. I mean, the same thing with our baptism. We're proclaiming what Jesus has done through that death, burial, and resurrection. That's what being united with him there. So there is more to it than just the communing with others.
True. True.
Yes.
So I think that we can take, if you can't meet with others, if you just don't have the ability or the power to do that, you can still remind yourself and anybody else who you might
True.
come into contact with what this is about. And
I would
so
agree. That
that
n
takes it that way. You're not going through the motions.
Right.
So that's what was going through my head while you guys were talking just a minute ago.
Well, and I think you're absolutely right that there is more things going on in communion, than probably any of us think right now. I
Right.
remember growing up, it was so heavy focus on you gotta focus on the death, burial, resurrection of
Mhm.
Jesus.
Mhm.
And it was later whenever I was reading the scripture and it says, Jesus says, "Do this in remembrance of me."
Hmm.
That's a whole lot more of him than his death, burial, and resurrection. There's
Yeah.
his life involved, and then you add to it the, of discerning the body, the language of
Mm.
discerning the body. Like, is Jesus talking about his physical body, or is he talking about his communal body? Maybe both, but
Oh,
there are
yeah.
so many
Definitely.
places where you can draw for emphasis, and sometimes what we do is the pendulum swings so far one way, that we start focusing so hard on the other that we almost neglect the language of the other side of it. And so I think we need to have that balance of saying, in this season of life, in this moment of life, I may not be able to commune with my brothers and sisters physically. I will commune with them spiritually, but I'm going to do the other aspects of what communion holds. Is that this
Yeah.
connecting, continually connecting with Jesus and proclaiming Him? I think there's something to that, Rusty.
Yeah. I can't fellowship alone, but I can proclaim and remember the gospel alone, even alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I appreciate that note, and I'll throw this out there, Rusty. You said this before the show, and I've heard you say this about other things. I know the nature of my question, and the questions I ask in general are often challenging or maybe even attacking to some. But I know the people taking it are doing it out of a desire to do what is right, to do what is biblical, and
Mhm.
I totally get and understand that, and I definitely respect that. As I sat there on Sunday morning, I just to myself was like, "Man, this feels in a way inadequate." But I appreciate you highlighting the other element of it. I wanna come back to something, we won't go too much longer on this, but I do wanna go back to something you mentioned. You said the Sunday night small group that meets at the building here offers communion, right?
So I've gone to that a few times. Our small group met with them, and that's what I remember. That's what I remember. I don't remember anybody taking it on those nights because I don't think anybody needed to. Uh, but
But
and
they
Pretty
and I
sure
they
they
could,
offered.
as far as I
Okay.
remember, they offered it. Now, it could be that one of those in the small group that's listening to this. If you don't do that, then you may come back and correct me. I have been told that sometimes I mishear things.
Well, I wanna throw this out there because I know we have people listening who are in lots of small groups. I wanna know, do any other small groups do it? Do any other small groups offer? And if not, and I know we have some that don't actually meet on Sunday night, but I think it's fair to say the majority of them do. The majority of the ones who meet regularly meet on Sunday night. And so I would kind of be curious to know, and you guys are in two different small groups. This will be a good
Mhm.
sample size at least. Do y'all small groups do it? Have you heard of small groups doing it? Have you thought about doing it, or has it just never come up?
So I'll take first stab at this. So uh, yes, our small group, it was part of our DNA for a long while. And it
Mm.
came about because one of the members of our small group, through work situations, wasn't able to be there Sunday morning, but
Oh, yeah.
wanted to
Yeah.
fellowship in that way with us. And we're like, yeah, no problem. And so what we ended up talking about and working through is that we would all take it together with him. And it was really kind of special. We'd have our normal time together of study, singing, praying, and then we'd all gather around the table, whatever home we're in. We'd have prayer and we'd all take it. And it was, sometimes we'd have a guided question, like, okay, so what do you think about during this? Or sometimes to talk to our kids about this because our kids were little and like, okay, you see this on Sunday mornings, but you don't have the opportunity to ask because it's quiet. You have the opportunity to ask here. What are your questions about this?
Yeah.
And it was really one of my favorite times on Sunday mornings or Sundays. And then it got out of practice. I think COVID, I think other things, whenever we just kind of forgot some of our normal practices. I think that's whenever it maybe went away. But our small group has talked about, should we bring it back? What is be a little bit more intentional with that?
So you
Mhm.
say it got disrupted during COVID. So you guys were doing this before COVID.
Yes.
It sounds like well before.
Yes.
That's fascinating. 'Cause I
Mhm.
know COVID made a lot of people rethink made us rethink everything, but it made them rethink, "How do we do communion? Should we do it? Should we go back to doing it this way? If we don't go back to doing it that way, what do we keep? What do we keep? What do we change?" We talk all the time about how we're a restoration movement, right? And sometimes the we theologically, we want to restore the 1st century church, but sometimes we restore the 20th century church, but that might be a conversation for a longer other time. Rusty, you're in a different small group. What have you guys done on that front, if
Our
anything?
small group has taken the Lord's Supper together as well.
Okay.
And now that you say that, Mitch, I think it was before COVID when
Hmm.
we did that. We didn't start out doing it um, when our group first started, but and I can't tell you exactly why we discontinued that, why we stopped doing that. Um,
Huh.
and I don't know that it's really been brought up again uh, since, but yes, we did. We came to a decision that that's what we'd want to do, especially in case somebody had missed that morning.
Yeah.
But
Did you all
Uh,
take it together as well?
oh, we did. Yeah, we would take
Yeah,
it
it
together.
brought up for us, it brought up some good conversation about some of the things we've already talked about, like, can we take it twice?
right.
Mhm.
Right.
And so we dove into scripture, like, okay, is there any restrictions on that? Is it um, as often as they gathered was the language that we gravitated toward of saying, well, if that's as often as they gather, if this is when we gather, then let's take communion. And so, I just curious if you had some of those same conversations.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I know that everybody falls in a different place on that, and and there are different reasons for it. I do remember when I was a kid growing up that that wouldn't have been something you would do. You wouldn't take it a
Oh,
second time
yeah.
because you're only told to take it once.
Yeah.
But um, I don't know that the wording wasn't quite that way, but that's the way it got interpreted, and so.
Yeah.
But yeah, even as a kid, I had questions about that. I said, "Why do we do this? Why do you have to go off into another room?" Or have you ever been someplace where they took it, they took the Lord's Supper, but they stood up and they took it in the room with everybody else.
Yeah.
While everybody else sat there and watched them,
Very
and that's
awkward, in
really
my
awkward.
opinion.
Yeah, and I've
We've got
seen that
the least
happen, and
standing
that was
of
just,
any other branch.
huh?
So we've gotta do the least standing of any other branch in our worship. We sit for most of our singing
True.
except for the beginning. We don't stand for the reading of the word like some people do. We don't
Mhm.
I mean, the Eastern Orthodox, they stand the whole time, at least back in the
Mhm.
they had the split. They're like, "Nope, whole thing." Well, that's interesting. I would love to hear from people who are in other small groups or just historically, if you've seen other churches do other things with either Sunday night or the way they've handled communion. I would love for you to let us know to I'd say write to us. I think what a lot of people say, but I bet most of our listeners know how to find us in person. If you don't know how to find us in
Probably.
person and you wanna bust out an envelope and a pen, you go ahead and write to us. But otherwise, yeah, probably message us, DM us, text us, call the church phone. Um, but in all seriousness, reach out, let us know. I'd love to hear how other people practice communion, and we'll follow up on this a little bit next week. Mitch, why don't you tell us what's going on Sunday?
Well, just to add to that, so we'll have an opportunity, hopefully this Sunday, for those that are there in our worship service at the end of the sermon. There's a QR code that'll pop up, and I'm going to have an option available there for if you have a question about the podcast or something that you want us to deal with in the podcast from the sermon. That's more so what I meant.
Yeah.
Question from the sermon for the podcast, then let us know there, and we will try to get to the different questions and get to things. But this Sunday is going to be what was supposed to be happening previous Sunday, since we decided to kind of shift things and I mean literally like basically the same song service that was planned for last week. And so why redo things when we don't have to? But this sermon continues the Holiness 101 in Leviticus, and we will be looking at the priesthood.
The priesthood,
Yeah,
the holy priesthood,
the holy priesthood.
Batman. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think there's any other events on the calendar. I think most things have been canceled, postponed. Something I'll go ahead and mention is something Mitch mentioned Sunday is we have Evening of Elegance. Evening of Elegance was one of those things that kids kept coming to me and parents kept asking me when it was, and I didn't know what it was. And I had to remind everybody I was new. But right now, it is on the calendar for the evening of February 15th. I hope that maybe next week or the week after, we'll have a couple of kids who've actually been to Evening of Elegance who could talk about it. Because I could talk about it in theory, but that would make the least sense. I'm the least qualified person potentially in our church to talk about Evening of Elegance because I've never been, I've never served, I've never set it up, I've never been a part of it. But I am in charge of it this year. So we'll bring somebody, maybe a couple somebodies in next week to tell us just a tiny bit about Evening of Elegance. But if there's nothing else, do you guys know of anything else calendar wise, schedule wise, update wise? Hopefully, we'll be cleaning the parking lot a little bit to get people back in here Sunday. I think the weather's gonna warm up enough for us to meet Sunday. It's looking pretty good from did I read the latest thread on that right? That we're leaning toward positively for Sunday?
Yes.
As much as we can.
Mhm.
Cool. Well, then as for those out there listening, if the weather permits, Lord willing, the creek don't rise, we hope to see you in the pew on Sunday. Thanks for listening.